Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we'll be making this really cool and fun vintage cat sweater, which is inspired by another YouTuber's creation. And I went on to stitchfiddle.com to recreate the design using my own colors. And the pattern is made up of 2 identical panels and 2 sleeves that we will sew all together in the end. For my main color, I'm using a pound of white acrylic yarn, and all of the yarn I'll be using is in a number 4 medium weight. You'll also need green, orange, yellow, and black. You'll also need a 5mm crochet hook, a yarn needle, and a pair of scissors. And before we begin the first panel, I highly recommend you save or screenshot this grid so that you can reference it when you work on color changes throughout the project. To begin making the panel, we'll start by creating the bottom ribbing. So first I'm creating a ribbon like this, and inserting the strand of yarn that's connected to the ball into that hole and pulling up to tighten. Insert your crochet hook into the loop. Next we will chain 11. To chain, yarn over and pull through the loop on the hook. Repeat this for a total of 11 chains. After 11 chains, we're going to half double crochet in the second chain from the hook. To half double crochet, yarn over, insert your crochet hook into the second chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. We'll repeat the same process in the next chain. Yarn over, insert your crochet hook into that chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Half double crochet in each chain until the end of the row. At the end of the row, you should have 10 half double crochet stitches. To begin the next row, chain 1 and turn your work. We're going to work in the back loops only. So yarn over, insert your crochet hook into the back loop of that V, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. So for this row, we'll work a back loop half double crochet in each stitch until you reach the last stitch of the row. When you get to the last stitch, we're going to work a regular half double crochet by going under both loops. So I'm picking up the front and the back loop and working a regular half double crochet. And we're going to repeat this pattern of chain 1, back loop, half double crochet in each stitch, and then a regular half double crochet at the end of the row until we have a total of 40 rows. So for my ribbing, I did a total of 40 rows, which corresponds to the number of rows on our chart, and the length of this is from one hip to the other, so if you need to make it bigger, then you can adjust the size of this chart. For this next part, we're going to work in the side of every row. So first we will chain 2, and we're going to work 2 double crochets into that first row. So here's my first double crochet. I'll make another double crochet by inserting my hook into that stitch right next to it. And this part may be a little tricky because you won't find perfect stitches to work into. So for this next row, I'm working 2 double crochets where that ridge is. So now I have 4, and for the next row we'll work another 2 double crochets. So you'll want to do 2 double crochets per row, and this number is important because it's going to give us a total of 80 stitches, which is the correct number for the graph that I'm using. And the reason we're making 80 stitches is because each square on the cat chart will represent 2 squares. So we'll continue to work 2 stitches for every row until we get to a total of 80. And for reference, we're working this chart from the bottom up. I finished the first row, which is 80 double crochets, and next I'll take a stitch marker or a safety pin and mark the front of my work. So this will represent the correct side of our project as we start working on our rows. So this is the outside of the sweater, and this is the wrong side or the inside. And one tip for navigating this project is whenever we're right side facing up, we will look at the chart from right to left. And if it's the wrong side, then we will look at the chart from left to right. To begin our next row, we'll chain 2, turn our work. So round 2 is on the wrong side, so we'll be working from left to right. We're going to start our color changes in this row, so grab the black yarn or whatever color yarn you're using and have that ready when we start to make the color change. So I'm looking at my chart and the first 2 squares are in white, which means I need 4 double crochets because each square represents 2 double crochets. So work a double crochet in the first 4 stitches. And one thing to mention is the chain 2 does not count as a double crochet stitch. So right before I finish my 4th double crochet, I'm going to leave those last 2 loops on the hook, and we'll take color number 1 and pull through the 2 loops on the hook with our first color. And I'm going to drop my first color's tail end off onto the wrong side, which is right here. And I'm going to do the same with my white yarn, and this just keeps all the loose ends on the same side. It makes it easier when we're sewing everything in. Now going back to the chart, the next 8 squares is in black, so that means I need a total of 16 double crochets. So I'm going to work a double crochet in the next 16 stitches with my black yarn. And you can choose to carry the white yarn as you go. It might be easier that way since white is our main color and you won't have to cut off the yarn and reattach it every time. So I do recommend keeping the white yarn attached unless the row contains no white, then you can feel free to cut it off. So I'm just inserting a double crochet, making sure I carry the white yarn along as I work on my stitches. I reached the 16th double crochet and I'm dropping the black strand of yarn and picking up my white and pulling the white yarn through the last 2 loops on the hook. And you can snip off the yarn until we come back to it for the next row, but in hindsight, I probably should have kept it attached. So the next 14 squares on the chart is in white, which means I have to do 28 double crochets. And I'm working my black strand of yarn in to avoid having a lot of loose ends at the end of the project. In my 28th double crochet, I'm going to drop my work and pick up color number 2, which is my green yarn, and we're going to pull through the last 2 loops on the hook with the green yarn. And I have 7 squares in green, so I'll be working 14 double crochets. So you can drop the loose ends to the wrong side of the work and work 14 double crochets in the green yarn. And I'm carrying my white yarn along as I go. After 14 double crochets, we can switch to color number 3, which is orange. So I'm dropping my green yarn to the wrong side of my work, and I'm snipping this off, but you can keep it attached as well. And I'm pulling through with my orange yarn. And this will be the 3rd color in our row. So there's 8 squares in orange, which means I have to work 16 double crochets. And if your stitches feel a little loose, you can use the white yarn that we're working into our stitches by tugging on it and tightening the stitches. Also pulling on this tail as well. For the final square of the row, we'll switch back to white. So I'll take the orange yarn and drop it to the front of my work, or the wrong side, and I'll pull through with the white yarn. And in my final 2 stitches, I'll work a double crochet in each of those stitches. And that will represent our last square. So we finished 1 row, and to begin the next row in every row, we'll chain 2, turn our work, and now we're back to the correct side because of our stitch marker. And looking at the chart from left to right, I have 2 double crochets in white, and then we're going to switch to orange. So I'm dropping the white yarn and picking up my orange yarn that I didn't cut off from the last row, and I'm going to tug down on the white yarn and pull through the 2 loops with orange. So the white strand is in the back on the wrong side, and with my orange yarn I'm going to work 4 double crochets because I have 2 orange squares, and I'm working that white yarn into my stitches as always. After doing 4 double crochets, I'm going to switch back with my white yarn. So I'll tug down on that orange yarn and then yarn over and pull through with the white. And our next square will represent 2 stitches in white, and we're forming the first eye of our orange cat. And after your second white double crochet, we'll drop the white yarn to the back and pick up our orange yarn again, and yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. So the next 2 squares are in orange, which means I'll work 4 double crochets. And I'm remembering to drop the yarn on the wrong side of my work, and also carrying the white yarn as I work with my orange double crochets, because we'll need to switch back to that to make the second eye. So once you get to the 4th orange double crochet, we'll drop the orange yarn and pull through with our white. And once again, I'll work 2 double crochets to finish off the second eye. And we'll drop the white again and pick up the orange. And whenever you carry your yarn, you want to make sure you pull it tight so it doesn't scrunch up and poke through. So my next 2 squares are in orange, so I'll work 4 double crochets. So I'm approaching the next color in my row, which is green, and the chart is showing 5 squares, so I'll be working 10 double crochets in green. And because I cut it off, we're going to have to reattach the green yarn. So you can pull that through the 2 loops, and at this point we want to cut off this orange yarn since we don't have to switch back to that color in the remainder of this row. So with the green yarn, I'm going to work 10 double crochets. And as I do this, I'm holding on to the white yarn as I work on my stitches. And you can also carry the orange strand of yarn that we cut off. I forgot to do it here, but that will help prevent more loose strands later on in the project. After 10 double crochets in green, we'll switch back to our white yarn, and for the next 15 squares, they're all in white, so I'll work 30 double crochets. And we're just going to repeat this pattern for every row on our chart. One tip that will help you throughout this project that I did is before you start every new row to check how much of each color you'll have to use, because that will help you figure out if you should cut off any yarn as you're working on your cats or continue to carry it along in your work. So continue to follow along on the chart and remember to tuck in the loose ends in the inside of the project. When you approach a row that ends with one color and starts with a different color, I'm just going to pull through the last 2 loops with that second color. So for row 22, it starts with white, so I'll pull through these last 2 loops with my white yarn. I completed 25 rounds in my cat chart, and you can see that there's a lot of loose ends on the inside. And now that we're finished with using all these colors, I'm just going to be using white for the rest of this front panel. So I'm going to work on double crochets in white for the next 16 rows. And you can choose to do less rows if you want the cat sweater to be shorter length on you. I'm starting my count at row 26 and working 16 rows up. To start working these rows, I'm at the end of row 25, so I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and work a double crochet in each stitch all the way across. So we're no longer going to be using any of the colors, so feel free to snip off all of the yarn that was attached, leaving a little bit of tail behind that we can weave in the end. After row 25, I did 16 rows in white, and if you line it up against yourself, it should come up to your neck. And if you want this to be longer or shorter, you can add or remove rows at this time. For this next part, we are going to be forming the neckline, and I'm going to double crochet across only part of the way. So to start the next row, I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and double crochet in the next 25 stitches. After 25 double crochets, you can count to make sure you have the correct number. Then we will chain 2, turn our work, and I'm going to work 7 more rows of double crochets for a total of 8 rows. So we already did row 1, and we're just going to work 7 additional rows of 25 double crochets. And the length of this is just how low you want the neckline to be. So if you make it longer, then the neckline will be lower, and if you make it shorter, then it will be higher. When you're finished the 8 rows, we can fasten off the right shoulder by chaining 1 and leaving a reasonable amount of yarn behind that we can use to sew to the back panel after we're done. So to measure, I'm going to leave about this much yarn and cut off right here and pull that through and tighten. We'll repeat the same steps to shape the left shoulder. So to attach our yarn, I'm going to count 25 stitches from the left, and in that 25th stitch, I will insert my crochet hook and pull up a loop with my white yarn, making sure I leave a long enough tail behind. Then we will chain 2, and the first double crochet should go into the same stitch that we inserted our crochet hook into. And from here, continue to work double crochets, and at the end of the row, you'll chain 2, turn your work, and work double crochets until you have a total of 8 rows. I finished shaping the left shoulder and fastened off, and now the front panel is complete. And we'll repeat the same exact steps to make a second identical panel. For the next part, we will sew the tops of the shoulder seams together. So lay your panels on top of each other, right side up, and we want to make sure all the loose ends are on the inside. So first, thread your long piece of yarn through the yarn needle, and I'm going to whip stitch along the top. So in these corner stitches, I'm picking up both loops on both edges and pulling through. And we'll go back in clockwise by inserting into the back loop in the next stitch and going through the front loop on the other side and pulling through. So continue to go through the back loop on the back panel and over into the front loop on the front panel and pull your yarn through, making sure that it's taut. And when you reach the end, you'll go through both loops on both sides and pull through. And I'm going to go through the opposite direction to ensure that the top of the shoulder is fully secure. And when you're done, we can insert the yarn needle through any loop along this side and wrap the yarn around the needle and pull through to create a knot. And with my crochet hook, I'm going to bring that strand in the inside of my work and cut off that yarn. Repeat the same steps to sew the panels on the other shoulder. Next we'll work on the collar, and I'm going to insert my crochet hook in the third stitch from the right because we're going to be doing double crochets 4 together. So take your white yarn and reattach it by pulling through with your crochet hook, and then we will chain 2. Work a double crochet into that same stitch that we attached our yarn, and work a double crochet in each stitch across for this middle section. And we're going to stop when we have 2 stitches remaining before the first corner. Now we'll double crochet 4 stitches together. So I'll yarn over, insert my crochet hook into this first stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and in the second stitch I'll yarn over, insert the crochet hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and when we turn we're on this corner section, so into this third stitch on the side I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the shoulder part, pull through 2, and we have one more stitch, so we'll yarn over, insert our crochet hook into this 4th stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops on the hook. So that will be the double crochet 4 together, and the reason we're doing this is to create a curve so that the corners aren't so sharp when we're making our collar. And then we'll just continue working along the side of this shoulder part by doing 2 double crochets per row. So this is my first double crochet, and in that same row I'll insert a second double crochet. So work 2 per row along the shoulder part, and when I reach the top of the shoulder seam I will just add 1 double crochet. Then continue to work down that shoulder, working 2 double crochets per row. And before the end of the row, at this next corner, we'll do a double crochet 4 together. So in these 2 stitches, I'll work a double crochet unfinished, and then yarn over, insert into the second one, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and I'll turn slightly, go into this 3rd stitch on the corner, and one more time in the 4th, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through all 5 loops. And we'll work double crochets across the back panel side, and when you reach the corner section where there's 4 stitches, we'll work a double crochet 4 together, and we'll work 2 per row along the shoulder, and in our last corner we'll do double crochet 4 together. So I'm at that last corner, and I'm going to work my last double crochet 4 together. At the end of the row, slip stitch to the top of the first double crochet. For the remainder of the collar, I decided not to do a ribbed collar, but instead worked a round of single crochets in every other stitch. So from here, you can decide to chain one and skip every stitch and work a single crochet, or you can add a ribbing similar to the way that we did on the bottom of the sweater. Next, we will work on the sleeves, and I'm going to start by working on the bottom ribbing. So we'll do a slip knot, insert our crochet hook, and chain 11. After 11 chains, we're going to half double crochet in the second chain from the hook. Half double crochet in each chain until the end of the row. At the end of the row, you should have 10 stitches, and we're going to chain one, turn our work, and work a half double crochet in the back loops only until you reach the last stitch of the row. In the very last stitch, we'll work a half double crochet going under both loops. And from here, we'll chain one, turn our work, and repeat the same steps again until this band fits around our wrist. So I did a total of 19 rows, and now I can slip stitch the ends together. First, we'll go into the front loop of that first stitch right next to the hook, and out on the other end, we'll go into the back loop, then pull the loop through all the loops on the hook. And we'll repeat this all the way across. For the very last slip stitch, we can go through under both loops on both sides so that it's nice and secure. When we're finished slip stitching the cuff close, we can chain two and start working double crochets into the side of the ribbing. We'll work 3 double crochets into the side of every ribbed row. So there's 3 in one row, and I'm working my way towards the left and doing another 3 double crochets on that ridge. At the end of the round, you should have 57 stitches, and we'll slip stitch to the top of our first double crochet. And for this next round and every round going forward, we'll chain 2 and work a double crochet in each stitch all the way around. And at the end of every round, we will slip stitch to the top of our first double crochet. And as you work on your seam, you'll start to notice it's going to slant towards the right. So in order to get a straight seam, to start every 4th round, we can chain 2. And instead of working a double crochet in the first stitch, we'll skip that first stitch and work a double crochet in the following stitch. And continue to work double crochets all the way around. When you make it all the way around, you want to make the first stitch that we skipped the last stitch of the round. So right underneath this chain 2 is what we skipped over, and I'm working my last double crochet in there, and then I'm going to slip stitch to the top of the first stitch. And this is optional, but it does help to keep the seam straight, so remember to keep track every 4th round by skipping over that first stitch and working into it at the very end. I ended up doing 36 rounds for my sleeve and also added some color changes to match the cats on my sweater, but you can keep this all white if you prefer. To finish off the sleeve, we can chain one and fasten off. And I recommend leaving a pretty long tail behind that we can use for sewing the edge of the sweater together and the sleeve onto our panels. The next thing I'll do is weave in my loose ends, and this is optional because the loose ends will always be in the inside of the sweater. So if you choose not to sew them in, then that's completely fine because they won't show on the outside. So I'm threading my yarn needle with this orange strand of yarn, for example, and we want to make sure to weave in the ends under the same color so that it doesn't poke through on the other side. And I'm inserting my yarn needle into a few loops on the orange cat and pulling that through to hide the loose strand. And you can do this a few times until you feel like it's fully secured. So you can go in this direction as well. And once you feel like it's hidden, we can take our scissors to cut off that little piece of yarn. And you'll want to repeat these steps to weave in the loose ends for all the other colors. I will be honest, this part was very time consuming, so I decided to not weave in most of the loose ends because it's on the inside, and personally it doesn't bother me as much, so I just left them as they were. For the final part of the sweater, we can work on sewing the sleeves and down the sides of the sweater. The first thing you want to do is line up each of the panels so that the yellow sections are matching up together. So this bottom portion, which has white, should line up, and I'm going to take a stitch marker to pin this together. And you can do the same thing with your sleeve. So I'm just lining it up to the top of the shoulder area. And you want to place it so that the seam goes along the bottom of the arm. I'm going to pin that in place and then thread the yarn through my needle. And we're going to start going into the side of the front panel and then going into the top layer of the sleeve into the outer loop. So we're working in the front loop on the right side and pull through the back loop on the left side. So I'm working from right to left. Again, we'll go into the front loop and then the back loop and pull through. And you want to be careful not to go through both layers and accidentally sew the sleeve hole shut. So it's important to be careful to work only in this top layer. And we'll continue working in this motion all the way up until we reach the shoulder part. At the shoulder part, I'm continuing working in the outer loops and pulling my yarn through. And we'll continue to work our way down the back of the sleeve. And when you reach the bottom, we can start to sew the side of the sweater together. And you want to be sewing tightly enough so that there's no holes. So at the bottom of the sleeve where it connects to the sweater, I'm just going in a few times on both sides to make sure that there's no gap in the armpit area when I wear the sweater. Now I'm working along the side of the sweater, and I'm still using my white yarn that's attached, but if you do run out, you can attach more yarn at this point. I'm approaching the section where the yellow cats meet, So I'm going to transition the white yarn to yellow. So I've threaded some yellow yarn onto my yarn needle and I'm inserting it into this first yellow stitch, and I'm pulling out a little strand and using it to tie a knot so that I can sew with this yellow yarn. And we can continue sewing as normal along the side of the yellow section. And I'm going through 1 or 2 loops because this area was a little bit thicker. So I continued sewing like this, and when you make it down to the white section, which isn't shown here, but you would just snip off the yellow yarn and reattach your white yarn. And that's the very last thing you have to do. And when you reach the bottom, we can just snip off the yarn and tie a knot with the remaining loose strands. So repeat the same process on the other side of the sweater, and here's the final product. I really hope this was a fun project to make, and if you learned something new and are interested in seeing my future crochet projects, then please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching!